Hi, I'm Brian Trageser of CIL Asset Recovery and CIL Auctions. A lot of people ask me on occasion, how did you ever get started in the auction business? And believe it or not, I've been an auctioneer a long time. I literally started auctioneering when I was 8 years old. My dad came home from auction school in the 1960s. I thought it was the neatest thing in the world to be able to auction. And within a couple weeks of my dad coming home from auction school, I was auctioneering. My dad was, he knew how to make money. He had a sawmill he ran. He had a great big huge heating business. And he also built a complete development, cabins, parks of over 70 homes in a complete park setting called Poplar Point Park. He had a big auction in the 1960s, and then he went away to auction school and became an auctioneer. So he had a 25,000 square foot facility, and he turned that into Auction City. My sisters and my mom and everybody worked, even my uncles, they all worked at Auction City. And we had an auction there every Sunday, all right? And you would work your ass off every week for this auction that we had every Sunday. We had about 600 people would show up. We'd start the auction at 1 o'clock after church, okay? And it would run through to early evening. And my dad had a nice place. We had fixed up nice. I worked. I mean, my dad's scenario was you know, even when a young kid, you still work. You came home from school and you got out of your school clothes, you got your work clothes, and you came over and you worked in the building. We used to call it the building. The lot owner, you worked in the auction hall. And setting up the auction. My dad had set it up, so he actually had a conveyor that came on down through, and we put merchandise in the back room, and he brought merchandise down through, and the merchandise came around the auctioneers on a big stage. That was great. They had all this seating. He had flags and all these beautiful signs that my mom had she painted by hand, stencils throughout the whole auction. And my dad had built this light tower, which was crazy. He'd tell one of the guys, go get a piece of glassware, out of the case, and he'd bring it over and they put on this light tower. And my dad had like a 1,000,000-watt bulb underneath there and turned that on, and ooh, and everybody go, ooh, ah, beautiful glassware. And it was a nice haul. He had actually fixed it up great. All right, at that point, we didn't make any money. Back then in the 1960s, you did most of your auctions for 5 or 10%, and even if you had a good day, you were lucky to come out of there on an average auction. You'd make $1,500 or $1,000. You'd work all week long to do it, and you paid help, and you paid the heating costs, and you're lucky if you made a few $100s or $500 or $600 at the end of the week. All right. But as Auction City was going on, one of the things my dad came up with was he gave everybody Auction City dollars. So in other words, for so many dollars, so much money you would spend at the auction, you got Auction City dollars, all right? And then every auction, he'd have a board, a bunch of merchandise set up, and believe it or not, I would go up on stage and I would auction off this merchandise at the age of 8, 9, and 10 years old. Okay, on the auction block. And that's how I first got started on the auction block, okay? So my dad bring up a socket set, it's only Auction City dollars, and guys, believe it or not, sometimes they have like a little dinky, junky socket set that would go for 3,000 Auction City dollars, because these guys would get all this Auction City dollars, and then they didn't have anything to buy with it. So sometimes it took 10, 15 minutes to auction off the Auction City stuff for the dollars. But everybody loved it. Okay, it was a great time. That's how we first got started in the auction business, and as that transpired, believe it or not, my dad went out and he wanted to do industrial auctions, but back then it was really tough to get an industrial sale. So he finally got his feet wet, and we got an industrial sale. All right, and on that particular auction, he made about $6,000 on his first industrial auction. He said, "That's it. Enough of this. I'm not going to do any more of that Auction City stuff. I want to do these industrials." And we specialized in sawmills right through the 60s and 70s and 80s. And me and my dad built, by the time I was a teenager in high school, my profession was already built in. All right, I was already on the road full time working for my dad's company. More so than me and my dad were more partners than anything else. Okay, we kind of grew up together in this whole auction business. My dad knew the sawmill business, and we specialized in woodworking and sawmill auctions. All right, nobody was doing any of those auctions at the time. Our auctions were insane as far as it goes. My dad was very meticulous about how he wanted the sales. The sales were very clean. We went in, we pressure wash. Our first company ever pressure wash equipment out. We wiped it all down, and we got everything sparkly. Okay, and we went in and nobody ever had auctioned off sawmills before, but my dad had run sawmills, so he knew how they should run. So we figured, well, this is the way we should break them up. We'd actually go in there and take cans of paint. We'd paint where the equipment was supposed to be cut apart, and we'd sell each piece individually and put them back together in bundles. The sales were hugely successful. As a matter of fact, through the 80s, 70s and 80s, right straight through into the 90s, we didn't even look for auctions. There was anything that was in the northeastern part of the country, as far as it goes, our company, Star Industrial, did it. Me and my dad were famous. I mean, our auctions, we didn't even have to go and compete against anybody. Sometimes somebody would come in and try to take an auction away from us and try to cut it the price in half, and we still got the auction. We didn't even have to work at it, which was good and bad as far as it goes for building a company. But by the time I was in my early 20s, I had already auctioned off hundreds of plants across the country. Hundreds and thousands of auctions. There was sometimes I was on the road doing sales, believe it or not, 4 or 5 industrial auctions a month. We would just jump. We were doing sales in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. We were doing sales in Vermont. I remember that we did a sale that was up in the tip of Maine one time, and Moose River it was called, and Moose River Lumber Company. We went in there and did this auction, and we actually had a French interpreter at the sale, because we had a lot of French Canadians that came down. We were right on that border, right on the Canadian border, and so we were trying to auctioneer with an interpreter there, and it was wild. And a lot of times we were jumping all over, and we were doing all kinds of sales, and all of our sales were successful. Okay, they were great sales. They were run very professional. I mean, as far as my scenario goes, I learned so much about the auction business, how to merchandise, okay, how to anticipate the buyers, how to break up stuff, and how to make sure that things were lotted in this category. There's a lot of psychology in auctions. People don't realize it. So much work goes into a setup. So when the public comes in, they really want to buy the merchandise, all right? And we did that. We did that better than anybody out there. And we had so many sales, that's the main reason we didn't go down south. Okay, there was still a ton of work to do down south. There was 2 main competitors down south that were doing a lot of the woodworking and sawmill auctions. And we didn't even bother. I mean, we had so many auctions up north. We had pretty much all of them. Okay, we didn't really have to fight with anybody for competition up here. All right, my dad was making millions, to be honest with you. So there was no sense in jumping over there. All right, that took me right into my late 20s, to be honest with you. Like I said, the day I graduated, I remember going in the week before, going into the principal's office, and the principal was saying, you know, you're not going to have enough time. You missed too much school here. You're not even going to make graduation. I says, doesn't matter to me. I said, I'm working full time. I was making more money than my friends. I was already on the road full time with a crew, doing auctions. And that's kind of where I got my feet wet as far as the industrial side of it goes. I'm going to take a little break right now, but I'll come back and I'll tell you what happens in my late 20s and the next section of auctioning and how we actually got down to doing closeouts and how we had facilities in 4 different states. We had facilities in Pennsylvania, and we had facilities in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York. I'll come back to you in a little while and tell you some more.